Hello, everyone, and welcome to Madlet Musings podcast with Jaime Jo. Right, that's me. And today, our guest author is Marlene Williams. Hello, Marlene.
Hi, everybody.
I am excited because when I do these podcasts, the format is always fun because it's like we're just chilling, having coffee. We haven't really scripted what questions we're going to talk about, and we don't really know where this is going to go. The only thing that we have to center us is a book that you wrote.
Yeah.
And so we'll start out with that and see where the conversation goes.
Okay. Well, all I have is my print proof, so this cute rally stripe actually will not come on your copy. I'm sorry, folks.
Right.
But
yes.
but everything else will be there. I promise you. And
Awesome.
this is a story that's a 1970s Jesus Revolution romance, which is, as far as I can tell, and I've done a lot of digging, the only one of its kind. It is a icebreaker. It's the it's the tip of the cow catcher, folks. So get on board while you can.
Yeah.
This is literally
you're creating your own genre,
which is not what I intended to do at all.
But it can be fun. It can
be. And I'm discovering that in many ways it is. And I just invite anybody else that's got one of these lurking in the drawer somewhere. You're like, nah, nobody wants to. Please bring it out and jump on board, because we're starting the soul train, and you just get on board behind me.
Atta girl. I love it. Well, for those who are listening on podcasts and not actually watching the video on YouTube, the book is titled All Men Are Liars.
Yes.
And that alone begs so many questions. And you do classify this as a Jesus novel, so this has inspirational content in it, so it's not a man-bashing book by any means, but it seems like there's some humor involved. So tell us a little bit about what the story is.
Actually, I think I would classify this as a rom-com, because it is, I've written it, I have a somewhat twisted sense of humor, and it has leaked into this book in large, actually didn't leak, it kind of flooded, but it's a Jesus Revolution romance #1, so it's part of a series, and it's set in 1973. It's the story of a dateless young woman named Dana Whitman, like the sampler, and she's just gotten baptized in the Potomac River in the Washington, D.C. area, and she thinks, I'm off to Christian college. I'm going to get a nice Christian boyfriend. What do I have to do in order to make that happen at a stuffy, very conservative, very orthodox Christian college? Well, of course, that means that she has to squelch her Jesus freaky ways and, get rid of the funky bell bottoms and wear Marsha Brady style, very modest little mini skirts. And it's really kind of a question of conscience versus compromise. How much of ourselves, of our authenticity, do we have to submerge in order to find acceptance and approval in the conservative Christian world? Now, there were, I'm sure, some Christian colleges back in the 70s that opened and embraced with open arms the Jesus freaks. This was not the norm. And in fact, Jaime Jo, this cracks me up. Every woman that has read this, and it's been primarily women, it's really targeted for people who went through the Jesus movement or are fascinated by the Jesus movement. Every one of them that went to Christian colleges, no matter where they went, they always, after they read it, they lean toward me and they say, this is about blah, blah college, isn't it? And I say, no, it's not. Are you sure? Because I really felt like it was, wasn't it? I was like, no, it really wasn't. Every time. It's uncanny. So it tells me it was a universal experience, that there were a lot of colleges. And the fun of this book, I think, is you really want this person to say, be yourself. It's a Little Mermaid moment. In fact, like, how much of yourself do you have to sacrifice in order to find true love? Do you have to walk around on the legs that feel like knives? Or can you embrace who you are and swim joyfully toward what the Lord has in store for you?
Yeah. Oh, I love that. So I'll be honest, I was born in the 70s. So I was little, so I can't say that I remember the 70s. Right. However, I will say there was kind of, growing up as an 80s, 90s kid, kind of like this leftover 70s vibe that merged into the 80s pretty strong. And it was kind of like it went from one extreme to the other Whereas like you had the Jesus Revolution in the 70s, where it was kind of like this exciting revival sort of period in time. And then you get to the 80s where I grew up, where it was all of a sudden crackdown on everything fun.
Yes.
Like,
It was a pendulum. It
very
really,
legalistic.
really was. It really was. And I'm glad you brought that up about the 70s, because one of the things, it was a battleground in the 70s. I was in high school and college in there, and there was free love in the streets. This was Woodstock, this was Nixon, this was women's liberation, this was the Earth movement. There was revolution everywhere, and it was anti-establishment. Abby Hoffman wrote a book called Steal This Book, and we all said yes. So we were in that movement, and the Jesus movement came along and swept from the West Coast in California. If you've seen the movie, the Jesus Revolution movie, you have a really good idea of how dynamic it was. And it swept over to the East Coast, and it actually jumped the pond and went over to England and Europe. You don't really hear much about it, but more on that later. But anyway, it was dynamic. People were on fire for Jesus. And one of the things that I coined a word for this or phrase for this book, and it's weaponized nostalgia. And
I like that.
It's kind of the idea of, you're reading this book, and if you live through the 70s, you're like, oh, I remember eating that. I remember wearing that. I remember those perfumes. So there's enough of an immersive, descriptive narrative in there that you feel like, oh yeah, I'm back. I remember this. And the reason is not to just take you on a happy little, memory lane trip. It's to stimulate that, reptile brain back there that remembers these things, and to say to yourself, I was different back then. I was on fire back then. What happened? What happened? So when people entered the 80s, as my generation was having children, setting homes, you're not usually standing out in the street handing out tracts anymore when you're trying to raise a bunch of kids. You want them to be safe from the evil world. So you take them to Christian school, you tuck them away, you homeschool them. And that fiery, passionate dynamism is sort of, let's just set it aside and get with the program here and just have a normal life, have a peaceful, Jesus-loving kind of life. And people get to that point. And in fact, one of my first readers, who was a baby boomer like me, and she was a Jesus freak, she was baptized in the Pacific Ocean in the late 60s.
So cool.
Yeah, so cool, right? And I know. She said as she was reading this, she felt like there was a little box in her that opened up, and she looked into it and thought, oh, I remember who I was. I remember that person. And she said, and it really struck her how much she had spent over the last 50 years getting normal, compromising, and setting that passion aside for the practicality, making a living, raising kids and all of that.
Right. Well, and I think there's that element of practicality that's obviously important, because we sort of have to survive and raise our children and things like that. But and being raised in the 80s, so I was the homeschooler, by the way, homeschooled, and I grew up with the phrase, we must be separate from the world.
Oh, yeah.
And it wasn't the concept of, I'm probably going to get a lot of people mad now. They're all going to stop listening.
Hey, if they aren't mad with All Men Are Liars title, yeah, you just dipped. I'm sorry.
Thanks, Marlene.
Sorry.
This is great.
Anytime.
But no, if we want controversy, just come to Madlit Musings. We'll give it to you.
Madlit, we'll serve it up on a silver platter, folks.
That's why we call it Madlit, because it doesn't make any sense. Okay. But no, I was in that group, which is like, be separate from the world. And it wasn't, I looking back now, it's kind of like, it almost took the concept out of context scripturally, because, I think, and I'm paraphrasing because I can't even remember the right scripture where it's from. So this is why I'm not an apologetic person. Like, I'm not Sean McDowell. Let's just put it that way. But, the concept is be separate from the world. In other words, so that your light can shine and people can see that there's something different about you and ask questions.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
But growing up, that was interpreted like, be separate from the world. garlic, hanging around the neck, walk around with a
Right.
silver cross, the world is filled with vampires. They're going to suck your blood and your soul. And so it was like, stay away. And
Right.
I kind of feel like there was this, and maybe I'm wrong, you can correct me because you were in the 70s where you could actually remember it, not to age you. You're beautiful. But I feel like there was like this 70s revolution. And then when I started getting raised, it was like the people who had been in the revolution were now really scared that they were going to make some dramatic mistakes or blur lines.
Mm.
And so in order to not blur lines, they created really hard gateways, like, do not move beyond this point or thou shalt be condemned. And they weren't even scriptural, a lot of them.
Yeah,
Like the
and
whole,
I really think it depends on where you lived, how it was interpreted, because on the West
true.
Coast, that probably was not the case. They tend to roll
A Midwest
pretty
girl.
easy. The Midwest, I think, has, like, through the generations, those barriers are there.
Yeah.
So, and they're just redefined, or, they have new category labels on them, but they're pretty
Sure.
much the same, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think part of that might be regional. That experience might be
I'm
regional.
probably dragging my own personal trauma out into this podcast now. It has nothing to do with your book. And you're like, Jamie, that's not at all.
People will react however they react. I can't control that, But what I can say is that I know that people that I didn't expect to identify with the book. They have said, I know what it feels like to feel like you have to compromise to fit in. I know what it feels like to constantly be giving these little, okay, I'm just going to carve that off, and I'm just going to, move that aside, and I don't need to insist on that. And,
Right.
So that has been a surprise to me. I've had reactions of younger people saying, yeah, when I went to college, I didn't know what to do, so I just tried to fit in desperately.
Yeah.
Almost panically tried to fit in any way that I could. And the rub is makes us individuals. He doesn't rubber stamp.
Yeah.
I mean, when you look at the just sheer numbers of the varieties of things that he has made, we don't have one kind of flower. We have like a gajillion kinds of flowers, right? So I believe the same goes for us as humans and as personalities. God put us here for a particular reason. Like, your personality, your perspective is a needed one. You are the type of person to talk to this type of people. You're the type of person that this person can identify with. So if we start to homogenize and blandify our experience as Christians, we are not shining our light. In fact, we are making it very murky. And then who's going to follow a murky light? Nobody.
Right. Well, it's hard to see it anyway.
It's very difficult. Yes.
Yeah. And it doesn't look extremely attractive.
Not attractive. No, not at all. And if you're trying to draw people away from something that is less than optimal, you have to shine that light brightly. And the contrast, I think, is what is meant by don't be like the world. Your light should be so different than the world. Like, the way you react to things and the way that you understand life should be markedly different than someone who is viewing it from the lens of, I have no hope. I have no idea what's going on. I feel I'm purposeless. I'm drifting through life.
Right. And keeping that fire and that passion is also hard to do as life goes on. Like, I kind of remember my youth when I was younger, and you have the energy for one.
Yeah, for starters. Yeah,
for
let's
one
go
thing,
with energy.
You got more energy. You're not going to bed at 8:00 at night. But on the flip side, there's this passion and excitement that comes with, as an older woman now, I might be like, comes with the immaturity of youth because you've not experienced life and all that going to, hit you and make you serious. And yet, as somebody in my 40s now, I'm looking back going, gosh, it sure be nice to have that kind of carefree joy again.
Yeah.
Where does that go, and how do we re-grab that?
I think that's one of the things in the book. I think that the question is, where does that go? And I think the minute you start compromising your individuality and your authenticity, that's the first shutter against your light. And radical obedience is what gives you joy. God puts you in a circumstances like, there's no way I can do this. And then he says, good, now you're going to see something awesome, because you're right. You can't do this, but watch me. And that actually, weirdly, that loops me back to being a pioneer in the genre, because it's the same kind of feeling of like, well, I didn't really sign up for this. I just thought I would get a really fun, quirky 1970s romance out there. And he was like, yeah, you're at the point. And I'm like, yeah, no, can we just rethink? I'm not sure I can do that. And he's like, well, good thing, because I can. So I independently published Jaime Jo, because when I went to a writer's conference last year, which shall remain nameless, I encountered some editors of some big five and some agents, and they said, wow, we really like this idea. We really think this is cool, but we just can't sell it. There's no comps out there. There's no comp titles. There's no audience for this, as far as we know. And let's face it, they're in it to make a living, right? So they're not going to produce a book that doesn't have a ready audience, or that they can't anticipate is going to make money for them, because they're a business. So I thought, well, I can keep ramming my head against this closed door that's closed for excellent business reasons, or I can just do a flip turn and say, okay, I'm going to start independently publishing. I'm going to start that journey. And here I am a year later, book in hand, waiting, trembling on the threshold of my debut novel. It's extremely exciting.
That is super exciting. And I love the fact that you understand the concept of business, which is the unfortunate side of publishing, where a lot of writers get frustrated, like, why would you like my story idea and then not publish it? Well, when you don't have marketing and advertising research to back up statistically, and the ROI isn't there, it's like,
sorry, but there it is. One agent said to me, maybe in 10 years. I was like, okay, I'm 69 years old, and I'm not exactly sure that I'm going to be trotting around to writers' conferences when I hit 80. So, I think I better. Oh, God
sure you will.
You never know, though.
You
never know. Here's the flip side of when you get to be this age and you realize you don't know what's around the corner. You really can't. You can't bank on it. Let's put it that way. So if you have this and the Lord has put it in your heart, and you feel like he's saying, green light,
just do it.
You better just do it. Yeah. You better just do it.
And honestly, that totally fits with the entire thematic element of your story and the era in which it was written. It's like, just do it. It's a revolution. Let's get this sucker out there.
And I never even saw this. I was talking to someone else about this and said, I should have listened to my heroine, because she was telling me in every possible way that she could, do you not see what you're doing here? You're trying to conform to the establishment. Why? This is not even who you are. Who are you trying to conform to the establishment? You're anti-establishment. That's the banner you've marched under, for decades. I was like, oh, good point. Yeah.
Yeah. So here you are, breaking molds. It's a good thing. It's a good thing. It's a fun thing.
And everybody out there, please buy my book and prove my point for me, will you?
Like, we should have this mass order now.
Everybody stampede over to Amazon
and it pick up a copy. Up on the New York Times bestseller list as a self-published book, and the publishers that you met with and the agents are going to be like, darn,
doggone it, that could have been our name on that.
Missed.
So sad. We should have listened to her.
We should have listened. Okay, I do have to ask though, the title.
Yeah.
All Men Are Liars.
All Men Are Liars.
Where does that come from, without obviously including spoilers and things that we shouldn't know about?
I wouldn't want to do that, because there is a massive reveal about 3/4 of the way through the book.
Okay.
The title comes from the Psalms.
Oh, do tell, because now my interest is piqued.
Yes. I just want to I want to get the reference correct. It's Psalm 51, verse 6. Shall I read it to you?
Please do.
I'm sorry, that's the wrong reference. Oh my gosh. I didn't even put it in there. I thought I was. I think it's Psalm 116. Anyway, it says, I said in my affliction, all men are liars. So, and I pulled out, because this is set in the 70s, when I have other visuals here. I'm so excited to share it with you.
Oh,
this was the Bible that we used.
Yes.
Does this look familiar to some of your
My
viewers?
mom had one of those.
Yes, she did.
And our church library had like 87 copies.
Of course, because after the 70s, everybody ditched their copies and went with Schofield, So yeah, this isn't my copy, I'm sorry to say, because I lost it in one of my many moves. But this was the Bible. And so all of the quotes in the book, all of the scripture quotes are either the Revised Standard Version, which was very popular in the 60s and 70s, the King James, or out of the Living Bible. The other, this is another visual for those of you who had this laying around the house, is Billy Graham's book, The Jesus Generation. And this is sort of a, I don't know, like a documentary almost. It's kind of like a retelling of what happened in the 70s. And this is the biggest visual. This is the first time that this object has been seen by anyone outside of the family since 1976, I want to say.
The year I was born. A tambourine.
This is not just a tambourine. This is my tambourine that I played.
Okay. My bad.
Complete with
my
Jesus stickers. Jesus, he's the real thing. And
look at that.
Yeah, this was my tambourine that when we would go and sit on the floor, cross-legged, barefoot in our jeans, and we would sing Jesus songs and Maranatha praise choruses, I would bring my tambourine. And everyone around me was either happy about that or so wished I would sit somewhere else.
Now, does the tambourine still get used? Please say yes.
No, it doesn't. It's not welcome. It's not welcome.
Oh, we have to make it welcome.
I know.
Tambourines are awesome.
They are. But in most,
they're really cool.
In most churches nowadays, the worship has, in some cases, please hear me, in some cases become more performative than a collective of everybody singing. Back in our day, everybody brought instruments and everybody sang. There wasn't a band up front. Okay. Everybody was the band. And
it was really a more kumbaya experience.
It was very kumbaya, and it was very collaborative, and we didn't even think twice about it. So,
that's so cool.
And nowadays it's much more like, these are the professionals. Leave this to the professionals, and you can, stand back here and sing with them. But if I were to trot out a tambourine in many churches, I think I would be escorted. Like, could you please? We're trying to worship here, Yeah. So
this isn't the place.
This isn't the place nor the time.
No.
Like, the parking lot's all yours, but please don't bring it into the sanctuary.
And that area over there in the parking lot, the far corner with the dumpsters.
Over there, yes.
That's probably more ideal. It's got better acoustics.
Yeah, try that. You'll like that much better.
Great.
It's over there by the children's playground. That would be great.
Yeah. Hey, you know what? Then do it. Take the tambourine over there, children's playground. I guarantee you will have a very wrapped,
very excited kids.
An audience.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I love it. Okay, so this is so cool. So we have the 1970s, we have the Jesus Revolution. When you look at readers picking up this novel, aside from being entertained, aside from the rom-com, etc., what is it that you really hope when they close the back cover that they walk away with?
I am praying that the weaponized nostalgia for those who live through it will kindle. See what I did there? Will kindle
totally got it.
An awakening in them and a desire to say, what happened to that person? And I need to get them back. I need to remember, not just remember it and look back on it. It's like, I was crazy when I was a kid, but more of the, that's part of who I am. And I have somehow lost that. And I need to regain that. And I need to be as committed, as dedicated to the cause of the kingdom of Christ. I mean, we believed we would change the world. Yeah. We believe that with every fiber of our being. And now I would venture to say that most of us in my age range are just like, that's for the youngsters. We're in retirement now. We're kind of settling in. So I'm hoping to let it be, this is a sword in the hand of the Lord, that he will start poking around in there and saying, now that you've had your laugh, think about it. Weren't you kind of like this? Don't you remember being like this? Wouldn't you like to be like this again? And I'm hoping for younger readers, in addition to maybe putting a new lens on the old people that they hang out with, of like, that person was a Jesus person? Wow, that's so cool. And also kind of explaining the zeitgeist of that era. There's a feeling, and this is not, I don't have any backing on this. I don't have a scientific anything, but then who cares if I do? I have a feeling that people in my age range often feel invisible because we're not at the forefront of like things anymore. And this generation is rapidly leaving. You know, there's like a few of us more leave every year. And the people who were the adults in the Jesus Revolution are definitely departing for heaven. You know, they were the leaders, they were the preachers who were welcoming, and they were the, you know, the Chuck Smiths, they were the others who were saying, we love you kids, please come in barefoot, smelly, long haired, all the guys look like Jesus, come on in, we don't care. And those people have felt, to me, disenfranchised and kind of set aside, and like, that's nice for you, Pops, but what does that?
It wasn't an important generation.
That wasn't very important.
It didn't impact anybody.
That was important, you know. And then we'll jump over war memoirs or their experiences like that. But somehow we weren't real. And someone who tells the viewer, somebody tell you this is what it was like to.
Right. And it was such a, I mean, we can go on and on and on for probably another hour, but it was such a pivotal time, because I remember being little and some of my friends' parents, of course, like I said, we were Baptist, and so you just got to be really careful what you do as a Baptist. But I remember them talking about how so these were my friends' parents, who were actually pretty conservative. Like, they actually wore the dresses all the time. I didn't. I was the more rebel, like, I'm going to wear jeans. But anyway,
can't see that. So.
That was, anyway. But it was interesting, and it made an impact on me as a little girl, because I remember my friend's mom sharing how she came to know the Lord. And she came to know the Lord, interestingly enough, even though now she was really withdrawn and conservative, she came to know the Lord through the music of Keith Green, who was, if I'm not incorrect, pivotal in the Jesus movement. Huge. And so, you know, now as I look back, and I was always like, who's Keith Green? I don't know who that is. And I remember asking my mom who that was, and she was like, oh yeah, I listened to Keith Green. And then we dug out some of his music, and you listen to it now, it's very different from the atypical Christian music you're going to hear on the radio. But point being, now, if I were to go to my daughter, who can name just about every Christian artist on the planet, and say, who is Keith Green? She's like, huh? And those, to me, are the unspoken, unheralded heroes of the faith, because it was somebody like that who helped my friend's mom come to know the Lord, and her impact on my life, regardless of how conservative it was, you know, helped in my formative years of growing up and my faith journey and walk. And so you look at just the seeds of one Jesus revolutionary in Keith Green, and now you've got it in me. And now my daughter's sitting in her room cross-legged with her acoustic guitar and her ukulele.
That's right.
You know, and you just kind of see this, you know, and so when people are like, why is history so important? Why is ancestry important? Why is all this? That's why.
Huge.
Shut up.
It features
don't shut up, but
Randy Stone, Larry, Jamie Owens.
I didn't know about that.
Right.
Wouldn't exist.
Or the modern service, they would call it.
Oh my gosh,
the modern service, right? The
I remember when that broke through in our church. It was like, woo, we're going to have some conversations.
Sad to figure out how to sing with it.
Yeah.
And punches. And so driving around in your car. And the Jesus,
the 8 tracks. And if you were really, really hip, you had it in your car. An 8-track. My parents weren't wealthy enough for that.
No, the music spreading around.
It did, because
music from California.
Yes, California, and then you hit the Midwest, and it just kind of like went, oh my goodness, what's going on? The West Coast is so wild. They're so wild.
Those crazy hippies.
Oh, but you know, I remember as a little girl, and I'll stop rambling, but you're bringing up all these old memories now.
That's good. Like, see, that's the
right,
point.
right.
That's the point. That's my jam, right?
I see the manipulation that's happening here. I see it.
And I try to be subtle.
You know, when we would have Sunday night sing-alongs, right? So you'd go to church in the morning, and it was the very traditional Baptist church, right? Where if you raise your hand, you're probably going to get excommunicated, which you don't really do in a Baptist church, excommunicate anybody.
Or they think you need to go to the bathroom if you're raising your hand. That must be.
Right. You don't raise your hand. So you stand there stiff and stock still, and you sing your hymns. But then in the evenings, we would have the sing-alongs, which I very clearly remember. This is so dumb. They had our church secretary, because they called them secretaries back then.
Oh, yes. That was not a dirty word. No,
No. But she had this paper, and it was kind of like this. It almost felt like that pressed paper, like that homemade paper. It was really soft.
Yes.
And she would type in columns the words to choruses. So choruses were allowed on Sunday night.
Right.
And then she'd have like the sheet coverings, and all the chorus books had these plastic spines with these glossy sheet coverings. And there was one that had a red glossy sheet covering. And I would go through the box every Sunday night until I found the one with the red sheet covering. And then the whole thing was you picked the number. So you'd raise your hand, and kids were allowed to talk.
Oh, wow.
So you could raise your hand, and if the pastor called on you, he's like, what number? You'd say the number of the chorus, and then you'd launch into the chorus. And so the kids, we were always doing like, be a missionary every day. Tell the world that Jesus is the way, be it in the town or country or the busy. I think it's funny how those songs like still stick
they never leave. No, they never leave.
No, they don't. But those were like the best times. And I mentioned it to my kids, it was like a month or two ago. Like, we need to have a church sing-along, and we need to get those plastic spined chorus books back. And my daughter was like, what are you talking about?
Yes, of
course. That
course.
sounds so boring. I'm like, children. Yeah, right? I'm going to show up in church on Sunday. You just watch me. All right. So readers, you want to get All Men Are Liars. It's by Marlene Williams. It's Jesus Revolutionary Romance. And tell us the best way to get the books, how to stay in contact with you, etc.
Great. Well, you shouldn't get too confusing.
Right,
the best way to stay,
which I've done,
is
the
a
quiz. And it's fun.
And this and anybody. It goes from cited on
fiction. Absolutely. Well, Marlene, this was super fun to have you on. And I just think it's going to be a blast. It's going to be a blast to see where the book goes. And I'm just going to throw out there, too, for anybody who orders Marlene's book, leave reviews on Amazon, Goodreads, BookBubs. It's not readers are like, I've had readers go, well, why are they even important? Like, do authors really need that many back pats just to write another book?
We're desperate.
Like, it really, it does make us feel good when they're a good review. It might make you laugh or cry depending on your personality if it's a 1-star, but that's okay. But honestly, what reviews do is it helps other readers to discover the book.
Yes.
Even a bad review helps push that book into an algorithm where people see it.
Yes.
Otherwise, you just kind of fall into oblivion in the millions of books that are on different sites to be purchased. So book reviews are not just a, greeting card to an author. They're actually a greeting card to your fellow readers saying, this is worth your time.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because people don't really realize that. They don't really realize it. And did you give And in fact, then a special table for you.
You didn't know that you wrote mystery too, did you?
True. It's for real.
Exactly. Yeah, always read the author notes too. Author notes to me are like the dedication pages. They're just, I don't know. It tells a lot about the person who writes the book. More so than the bio, I think.
Yeah.
But I think my last author notes, I thanked Walmart. I'm pretty sure I thanked Walmart. And I know in the book that I just got my author copies, my author's note was, I gotta find it now. Yeah, like I thanked Frederick Meyer Gardens and Sculpture Park in Grand Rapids, Michigan, which does not sound very exciting, but you learn where the authors get their information, and then you can go check it out. So it's super cool. Author's notes, book reviews, and we should probably stop talking now. It's been fun. No problem. I love the winging. I think you get more real when you wing it, and it just becomes more authentic. So thank you, Marlene, for being here. Readers, check out marlenewilliams.com. Marlene spelled with an L-I-N-E at the end. All Men Are Liars is the title of the book. You're going to want to check it out and join the revolution.